Welcome to Spotlight Philippians, Invitation to Joy. Tim Janisewski, Director of Spotlight Good News Ministries, with you here again as we look at this fabulous letter that Paul writes to his good friends at the church in Philippi, again written about 60 AD. Let's not lose sight of our goal. Our goal is that as we see the affection and the way that the Philippians related to Paul, Paul related to the Philippians, that the joy, the healthiness of their relationships with one another will spill over into the way that we have relationships with God, we have relationships with fellow Christians in our sphere, and even as we relate to ourselves on the interior part of our lives. We're into chapter 4 now, and actually we're going to run into a little bit of conflict here in this relatively peaceable letter. All the conflict to this point has been outward in direction. It's been against those Judaizers, as they're called, the circumcision party, the people who say that you need to have religious performance. The threat has been from the outside by those who say, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we will die. Well, we finally come to a little tiny example where on the inside of the Philippian church, Paul is having to address a matter. We're in chapter 4, verse 2, 3, just 2 verses on this one. I entreat Euodia and I entreat Syntyche to agree in the Lord. Yes, I ask you also, true companion, help these women who have labored side by side with me for the gospel, together with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life. Wow, well, we actually have 2 people in the church here in Philippi who are not getting along with one another. These are 2 ladies, Euodia and Syntyche. And Paul holds these 2 ladies in high regard. You notice how he says that they are in the book of life. That's a way of Paul saying, I recognize that these are valid, true followers of Jesus. And when the roll is called up yonder, Euodia will be there. Syntyche will be there. They are legit. But in addition, he says, they've been co-workers with me. I've been side by side with them in the work of the good news as we spread it to friends and relatives, associates and neighbors throughout Philippi. So these women are legit. They're probably well known because of their spiritual influence in Philippi. And we don't know what's going on here, but for some reason the 2 women are having a disagreement. And we have seen that Paul emphasizes the unity of the church. He says then in chapter 3 that you can make my joy complete by being of one mind and one heart, one spirit, being unified together. And in some small way, the unity has been fractured between these 2 women. They're not united in mind. They're disagreeing with one another. And what's really great here is it's not widespread. It seems to be that Paul could just pick out this one report he's gotten about these 2 ladies who are in conflict with one another. There's nothing systemic, there's nothing gangrenous within the entire congregation. But that's the point at which we need to address our disagreements before they proliferate, before one side says, I think Euodia is right, and the other one says, I think Syntyche is right, and I'm for one party, I'm for another party, and the church is split, and they divide and become 2 congregations, and it's a blemish upon the life of the church. But Paul doesn't want that to happen. So he says, we got to nip this one in the bud. Euodia and Syntyche have not been able to work it out, so Syzygus, which means yoke fellow or fellow companion, he's calling upon some spiritual leader to get together with these 2 ladies and to work this thing out. They need a mediator. First of all, notice, you don't let things fester. You don't look the other way. You don't pretend that nothing is wrong. That's what we do so often in our relationships when there's a disagreement. Paul says, no. We try to work it out together as mature Christians, and if we can't, then we call on a third party to come in and try to mediate the peace between us so that the joy may be full and so that the problem might not spread to other folks as well. And that's what's going on here. It really reflects what Jesus taught in Matthew 18. He says, if you have something against your brother or sister, go and see if you can reconcile it. If you are able to, great. But if you have not been able to do it, then bring one or two others with you to seek that reconciliation. And that's exactly what Paul is calling for here with syzygus. It's a level 2. Level 3 for Jesus was, if that doesn't work, then bring it before the whole congregation or the elders and leaders of the congregation. So we've got to be healthy. We're not perfect. We've seen we're all works in progress. And when progress breaks down with a brother or sister in Christ, we've got to address it. Why? Because we want to have peace and love among God's people. Remember, a unified sense of affection leads to a unified sense of joy. And Paul wants to restore the joy between these women and keep the joy within the church family. Do you need to work on that with someone you know in your church family, your set of relationships? Use this as a model. Take the step forward because it's an invitation to joy. We'll talk to you next time.